Marcello Moretti had survived bullets before, but one that nearly killed him came on a chilly November night in Chicago. By the time his men dragged him into the emergency room, his dark emerald-tailored suit was soaked in blood, and the doctors doubted he would survive the hour. Until Dr. Eve Roberts arrived in the emergency department. Dr. Roberts was a traveling trauma surgeon known for accepting assignments where few physicians would go, from Chicago to Baltimore, Memphis, New Orleans, and Detroit. Wherever violence stole lives, Eve tried to give them back. For 14 hours, she refused to let Marcello Moretti die. She operated on him with care and focus, and when Marcello finally opened his eyes, days later, the person that had saved his life was gone. Marcello searched for the woman who had refused to give up on him and wanted to know why she worked on him without wanting thanks or praise. Marcello would find that Eve was hard to track down. His investigators learned only fragments about her. She never stayed in one city. She owned almost nothing. She had no husband, no children, or immediate family. Her parents and younger brother had been killed years earlier during a drive-by shooting, and ever since then she had dedicated her life to saving strangers. To Marcello, she became the only person who never wanted anything from him. Marcello became obsessed with the pieces that he knew about Eve Roberts, and he began to forget she had her own wants and needs. Nearly 2 years later, a medical conference in Miami is where Marcello would finally meet his guardian angel again. Marcello arrived wearing an expensive tan suit, introducing himself not as the head of the Moretti crime family, but as an international investor interested in hospital expansion. That's when he saw Eve Roberts, not from just pictures or reports, but saw her as the beautiful person that she was. Eve was respectful to everyone she met and greeted even the hotel staff with pleasantries. Marcello continued to fall even more for Eve. Marcello then noticed that Eve wasn't drinking and brought her a soda with cherries from the bar. Eve smiled brightly at Marcello and said,
"How do you know I don't drink?"
Before Marcello could answer and say, "Because I know everything about you," he stopped himself and said,
"Because you strike me as someone who likes to keep a clear mind. Besides, the world needs doctors like you, thinking at their best."
Eve laughed softly.
That's probably the nicest way anyone's ever called me predictable.
Marcello had broken the ice, and Eve spoke about medicine with a passion he'd never heard before. She even asked questions about him and attentively looked at him when he answered. Within that 2-hour conversation that night, Marcello realized he wasn't simply grateful that Eve saved him, but he loved her. Or at least, he believed he did. Then Eve quietly mentioned that after the conference she would leave for humanitarian work in Kyiv, Ukraine. Marcello couldn't imagine losing her again. After wishing Eve good night and walking her to her hotel room, he stood alone in the hallway for several minutes. For the first time in years, Marcello Moretti felt powerless, so he made a decision that would haunt him forever, and he shot himself. The wound wasn't fatal, only serious enough to ensure he would be rushed to the very hospital where Eve was temporarily practicing. When the trauma team called for Dr. Eve Roberts, she rushed into the emergency room without hesitation. Once again, Dr. Eve Roberts saved his life. Several days later, after Marcello had stabilized, Eve stopped by his room before beginning her rounds.
I suppose this is becoming a habit.
She teased with a tired smile. Marcello chuckled before the smile faded from his face.
"I lied to you."
Eve looked at him, waiting for him to finish his sentence.
I'm not an international investor.
She folded her arms but remained silent.
My name is Marcello Moretti.
Recognition crossed her face, but not shock or horror as he continued.
I'm the Don of the Moretti family.
Marcello searched her eyes, expecting fear, disgust, maybe even hatred. Instead, Eve sighed.
Well,
She glanced at the bandages covering his chest.
you should probably be more careful around people with guns.
Marcello blinked.
That's it?
She gave a small shrug.
I've treated gang members, police officers, politicians, homeless veterans, children, and people who have made terrible decisions. My job isn't to decide who deserves to live.
She offered him a warm smile.
My job is to save them.
As Eve turned and walked out of the room, Marcello couldn't help but smile. Eve wasn't terrified nor impressed. She simply saw another patient, and somehow that made him want her even more. So Marcello made up his mind and kidnapped Eve that same night. For months, she remained hidden inside one of Marcello's estates outside Chicago. Marcello tried not to make Eve feel like a captive by buying her books, built her a clinic where she could work on people within the Moretti family that were injured, and he told her,
If you eventually love me like I love you, I can give you the world.
But Eve knew that every promise from Marcello always came with a gesture of what he thought love was. Eve knew she was in a beautiful prison, even if Marcello never saw it that way. She always told Marcello,
You cannot force someone to love you by taking away their freedom.
One autumn morning, 2 years within her captivity, the guards found Eve Roberts dead from a self-inflicted suicide. She left a drawing of a bird flying out of his cage. After Eve's death, something inside Marcello died with her. He couldn't go and get retribution on anyone. Deep down, Marcello knew he had tried to make someone love him that wanted to be free. The grief hollowed him, and the guilt poisoned him. Marcello searched for mediums, occultists, anyone who claimed they could speak to the dead. Eventually, he found that something answered. It wore Eve's face, her voice, and it whispered,
If you love me, you should hurt others like you hurt.
This fed Marcello's rage, but Marcello didn't know it was never Eve that had come back to him. It was just his guilt, fear, and rage that fueled his thoughts. Over the next 3 years, the Moretti name became feared throughout Chicago, and those closest to Marcello knew the Don had changed. Only Marcello believed he had finally gotten Eve back. On the 5th anniversary of Eve's death, Marcello was killed when visiting Eve's gravesite. As Marcello bled onto the graveyard, the veil between worlds grew thin. This time, the real Eve appeared. She looked more beautiful than he remembered, warm, radiant, and peaceful. Marcello reached toward her, thinking Eve was there to take him to where she would be, but smiled with sadness and said,
You can never cage a free bird.
Marcello remembered the picture Eve drew and that he carried in his pocket for years, and he wanted to cry, scream, and yell, but all he could do was look as she disappeared into the light in which she had come. Marcello's final breath escaped as unseen hands reached for him and dragged him into the darkness.